of the school address. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's good to see you here, and I guess good to see, I can't quite see, but good to know there are people watching from elsewhere. Welcome to the Harvard Kennedy School reunion. It is wonderful to have all of you back on campus. I know that hundreds of you are coming for this event from many parts of the country and the world, and it's terrific for us at the Kennedy School to have you back with us. Welcome back. I want to start with a few thanks of my own. I am so grateful to the reunion volunteers who have worked closely with our Alumni Relations and Resource Development team to make this reunion possible. I'm grateful as well to all of you who have made gifts to the Kennedy School in honor of your reunions. Your gifts enable us to bring to the school students who would not otherwise be able to be here and to provide them with rich curricular and co-curricular opportunities that you remember from your own time as students. I am thrilled that more than 700 alumni, I'm told, celebrating a reunion this year have made gifts to the HKS Fund so far. I want to give special shout outs to 3 reunion classes. I'm told the class of 1972 has the highest percentage of alumni who are giving this year. And I want to welcome at least 3 members of the class of 1972 who are sitting right over here. Thank you for being back with us. I'm told the class of 2012 has the highest total number of classmates making gifts. Will members of the class of 2012 who are here stick up a hand so we can see you and applaud you? Welcome back. And the class of 1982 has raised the largest amount of money of any of the classes, more than $250,000. Moreover, this class has set up some long-term commitments so the gifts will continue into the future. So can members of the class of 1982 stick up your hands so we can greet you and thank you. I also want to thank everybody who is giving of their time to the Kennedy School community. Those of you who are talking up the school to potential applicants or to accepted students, those of you who are hosting students for internships or are representing clients for policy analysis exercises. In all those ways, you are helping to improve even more the experience of today's students. And I want to thank all of you who are reaching out to other Kennedy School alumni. We are a group, you are a group tens of thousands strong around the world, and your connections with each other and the work that you're doing are such an important part of the mission and work of the Kennedy School. So thank you for all the time that you are devoting to keeping this community so strong. Here in Cambridge, we've had a terrific year back on campus. As you know, Harvard took a conservative approach to the pandemic. And by the way, I do want to encourage you to wear masks indoors when you can during these next few days. We took a conservative approach. Essentially all of the teaching and the research and the operational work to keep the school running was done remotely from March of 2020 through July of last year. But for this past academic year, we have been back on campus, and it has been wonderful. We have had various COVID limitations, of course, required vaccinations, testing, mask wearing, changes in rules about eating and visitors and so on. It's been a little complicated, but basically we've been back and it's been great. I think we used to take for granted the ability to be together in person, and now we appreciate how wonderful that is for our educations and for our enjoyment. And there's been an extra spring in the step of the students and the staff and the faculty of the school. As we look beyond the Kennedy School campus, we see that we can all see that we are in a world of profound challenges. We have a terrible and continuing pandemic in which millions of people have died or lost loved ones or suffered in other ways around the world. The country of Ukraine has been brutally invaded with horrific and broad consequences. We watched deadly attacks on Americans in Buffalo, California, Dallas, and elsewhere because those Americans are black or Asian or Jewish or Muslim or disfavored in some other way by a rhetoric of hate and white supremacy that is increasingly common. We see so many words and deeds that undermine our democracy for selfish political gain. We are enduring alarming changes in the climate and environment and much more. Meeting these challenges requires collective action. Action not just by individual households and businesses, but action by communities and societies and our whole world. And these collective actions need to be principled and effective. We have seen so clearly over the past few years how good public policy and public management and public leadership can help people to thrive, while bad policy or management or leadership can cost people their lives and their livelihoods. And that's where Harvard Kennedy School comes in. Making public policy and leadership better is why we exist. We are striving to improve public policy and leadership so people can live in societies that are safer and freer and more just and more sustainably prosperous. Our success in this mission comes from our identity as a professional school focused on the practice of governance in a great university. So we combine the teaching of outstanding students and cutting-edge scholarship that one expects at Harvard with a deep commitment and engagement with the real world of public policy and leadership. We pursue this approach in many different domains, as you know, and I cannot begin to cover all of them in my prepared comments this morning. What I'd like to do is to touch on 3 areas where we are especially focused right now, but then to open this up for questions and comments and hear your perspectives, and you can ask about any topic that you want that I might have a chance of being able to answer. So let me start by talking just briefly about these 3 topics. I want to talk about the war in Ukraine, about race and public policy, and about democracy. So first, our faculty, our students, our staff, our alumni are grappling with Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. Ash Carter, who served as U.S. Secretary of Defense, as you know, spoke in the forum here soon after the invasion. We hosted panel discussions of other faculty members, including Graham Allison, whom you all know, and Fred Logoval, who's a more recent arrival on our faculty. Also panels of students from Ukraine and neighboring countries. And these discussions were illuminating and moving. Our Kennedy School podcast, which is called Policy Cast, has featured faculty members Megan O'Sullivan talking about energy markets, Jeff Frankel on economic sanctions, Catherine Sinking on the humanitarian crisis. One of our mid-career students, Elena Vachnova, has been helping Ukrainian refugees who have sought safety in her hometown in Slovakia. Andrei Liskovich, a Ukrainian alumnus of the Kennedy School, has mobilized donations and relief efforts. And Maya Sandu, from the mid-career class of 2010, is president of Moldova, which has been taking in daunting numbers of refugees and is vulnerable to Russian policy in many ways, and yet is trying to chart an independent course in the world. And President Sandu will actually be our graduation speaker at the Kennedy School here next Wednesday. These efforts and many others by members of the Kennedy School family are helping the world understand and respond to a war that is both frightening and heartbreaking. The second topic I want to touch on is our increased focus on race and public policy at the Kennedy School. In the past few years, among other changes, we have hired nearly 10 faculty members whose research and teaching addresses race and public policy. We've increased financial aid for students who will serve underserved communities. And we've added required material on race and public policy to our curriculum. Our commitments to opposing racism and discrimination through public policy, to supporting governance of Native nations, and to advancing diversity and equity at the Kennedy School are all an outgrowth of our values and are all fueled by our knowledge and skills. I'll give 3 specific examples. One is Professor Cornell William Brooks. He arranges for students to work with local public leaders on issues of equity, including a year ago with the leaders of Birmingham, Alabama, about ways to reform their policing. Another specific example is our Harvard project on American Indian economic development, led by Professor Joe Kalt, which has provided invaluable guidance to Native nations in responding to the pandemic. And the third example is Professor Sandra Susan Smith, a recent recruit to the Kennedy School faculty, who's organized the Roundtable on Racial Disparities in Massachusetts Criminal Courts, which is a collaboration of scholars and practitioners looking for ways to improve the criminal justice system in this part of town. And then the third area of emphasis of the Kennedy School that I want to highlight is our work to strengthen democracy. Both here in the United States and around the world, democracy is being undermined by powerful forces. Ensuring its success is imperative for the citizens of established democracies. It's also imperative for ensuring that democratic values prevail in the clashes that we are seeing and will see in the post-Cold War era in which we find ourselves. So the Kennedy School has both an opportunity and a responsibility to make a significant positive difference in renewing democracy. We have recruited new faculty, started new courses, and launched new initiatives. Specific examples here include Professor Erica Chenoweth's research and teaching on nonviolent civil resistance around the world, Professor Latonya Sweeney's project with students to protect voter registration in this country, and Professor Matt Baum's new journal called Misinformation Review. I can also mention that this spring's Dean's discussions that I host for our students, staff, and faculty were centered on democracy, dialogue, and division. Our faculty experts discussed and took questions on threats to democracy, on the value of having difficult conversations, and on polarization and political differences. So I exchange with all of you. So let me wrap up. I tried to give you just a few highlights of the important activities that our students and faculty and staff and alumni are engaged in. As you know from your own time as students, so many things are happening all the time at the Kennedy School that I couldn't possibly refer to them all, but a lot more is happening and we should talk about that. The bottom line for me about the war in Ukraine, about race and public policy, about democracy, is that Harvard Kennedy School is taking on the big public challenges of our time. The world needs what we can help to provide: more evidence-based public policies, more effective management of public institutions, and more worthy public leaders. That's why we do what we do. That's why we develop practical new ideas, disseminate those ideas through every channel we can find so they make the biggest difference, and train outstanding students who go on to become our amazing alumni. I am proud that so many of the Kennedy School's alumni are working around the world, carrying out our mission of serving others and improving people's lives. Thank you for your part in that. Thank you for coming and being here at the Kennedy School for this reunion. We've missed you the last few years. It's great to be back in person. I hope you have a wonderful time. And I'm happy to take any questions that you have. Thank you.
Good morning, Dean Elmendorf.
Good morning, Marvin.
For the audience, my name is Marvin Benton. I'm the past president of Black Alumni Association. I finished up my term last October 2021. I am a current member of the HKS Alumni Board. I've had many meetings with you, sir, in your office, with your staff. I want to know if you could update us and tell us what have you personally been doing to diversify the students coming into this school. What have you been doing to improve the diversity of the staff and the faculty? If you would address that for us, please.
Thank you, Marvin. We now publish every October a report on some key aspects of the demographic diversity of the Kennedy School students and faculty and staff. And we report this every year so that our students and faculty and staff and alumni and our friends can see what we're doing, or see the results of what we're doing. And so I am pleased that if you look at that report from last October, you can see changes in the demographic composition that amount to increasing diversity around race and ethnicity among the US students of the Kennedy School. As I think you all know, almost half of our students come from outside the United States. You can see the collection of flags of the students of the countries of this year's graduating class. This is not every flag in the closet. It's not every flag for the country, for the world. These are the flags of the students who are graduating this year. So we have a tremendous amount of international diversity, which is a huge strength of the school. But in this report that we published in October, we dig into the demographic diversity of our US students and staff and faculty. And so there has been a significant increase in the percentage of our students who are Black or Hispanic or Latinx over the last 3 years. And that is the result of changes in how we recruit students and changes in our process for reviewing applications to make sure that we are not losing talented future public leaders and policymakers. And this is a set of changes. There's no single, we did this in the applications or we did that. It's a collection of changes. But together, these have enabled us to draw to the Kennedy School a more diverse set of applicants who will be outstanding policymakers and public leaders, and enabled us to recruit those students and have them come to the school. For the staff, our Human Resources Department is much more deliberate now in the way it casts the net for applicants for open staff positions. There are particular ways in which there are places one can offer jobs. There are ways in which one writes position openings and goes about recruitment that we've learned from other organizations that are on the same journey we're on. And that set of changes, I hope, will help. But it's, I think, not apparent yet in the numbers, but it's a clear commitment of our human resources staff, our managers, and of me. For our faculty, similarly, we shifted our procedures a few years ago. The academic dean at the time was Iris Bennett. Iris is a world-known expert on gender issues, and in particular, she wrote a book several years ago called What Works regarding gender issues. Some of those same process changes can affect and can enhance diversity along alliance in addition to gender. And so when we do faculty searches now, we're much more deliberate in how we get the word out about that we're looking for people, how we make sure that we encourage people to apply, and how we consider them when they've applied for these positions. The result of that is that the faculty we brought in over the last few years are notably more demographically diverse than the existing set of faculty members. Of course, the flow is pretty small relative to the stock, so the changes will be clearer in the numbers over time. But if you look at the flows of new faculty we've hired, they're more diverse than the faculty we had a few years ago. Thank you, Marvin, for the question. Sir.
Yes, David Wheat, class of 72, MPP. And for the last 10 years, I've been managing a project in Ukraine that's been funded by the Norwegian Foreign Ministry. And so my question is really more of a request to anybody here who's concerned about this situation in Ukraine. Prior to the invasion over the past year, my research and my teaching in Kyiv and Lviv was interrupted by a new project to start developing an economic recovery project and plan for the eastern region, the Donbas region. And at that time, of course, it was the only area that had suffered from war for about 8 years. And then all that was put on the shelf, when the invasion occurred. So my request to you and to others here who have an interest in Ukraine is maybe get in touch with me. I'll be around for the next couple of days. And I know that there's a cadre of folks here who have been working on this issue from a variety of angles. And I'm now working with the Ministry of the Economy and the Ministry of Reintegration within Ukraine to try to extend the work that we had started in the eastern region, which is now obviously a 10,000-fold bigger problem than before. So yes. Anyone who wants to tap me on the shoulder, I would appreciate it. And I'd like to meet some of the folks there. Thank you.
Thank you for your good work of the past and your promise of good work for the future when, as you say, the challenges are much, much larger even We have some faculty members who are in touch with U.S. government agencies and seeing what role we can play in helping the Ukrainians to rebuild their country. And I would certainly encourage anybody who has ideas and wants to put a shoulder to the wheel to see Mr. Wheat here afterward. So thank you. Can I ask separately, will you tell us what Larry Bacow was like when he was a student?
I'm sorry?
Will you tell us what Larry Bacow was like when he was a student? He talks a lot about his roots at the Kennedy School, but I don't have any witnesses to that. Okay. Please.
Hi, good morning, Dean. Thank you for the state of the school. My name is Arturo Franco. I'm an MPA ID 2005. I'm joined by my wife, Catherine, who's a mid-career 2012, and our daughter, Sophia, hopefully 2042 alum.
Great.
So a few years ago, during my reunion, one of the updates that you gave was a emphasis on digital technologies and the potential that it has not just to transform how government is done, but also the impact that tech companies are having on things like democracy and race. And so I wanted to know how that is going and if there's any kind of particular focus on AI and the challenges that it's creating in the labor market.
Yeah, thank you for the question. The answer is that we made some progress in work on the intersection of technology and governance, but not as much as I would have liked, and not as much as we intend to make over the coming years. So for me, a lot of this starts with the faculty members at the school, right? Because they're the ones who develop the courses and do the research and reach out to policymakers. And so we made two terrific recruitments just a year or two ago now. One is Professor Latonya Sweeney, and one is Professor Sharad Goyal. Latonya Sweeney is a joint appointee of the Kennedy Schools and the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. She's also the faculty dean of Courier House, what used to be called House Masters. So she's very engaged around Harvard. She's a computer scientist, very accomplished computer scientist, who got especially interested in the social implications of the technology that she and others were creating. She spent some time at the Federal Trade Commission as a regulator. So now she's here building a public interest technology lab, I think is her phrase. And it's a really wonderful set of work and involving students. So I mentioned this thing she did about voter registration. It turns out that it's pretty easy if you wanted to go right to the city of Cambridge and say, I'm Doug Elmendorf. I just moved. Please move my voter registration. You can mostly do that, it turns out. I don't know how, I've not tried this. But I'm told it can be done pretty easily. And then if I turned up to vote, then it would turn out that I couldn't vote because my address wouldn't match where I thought the records wouldn't match where I actually lived. And she and her students devised software that alerts people if their voter registration has been changed. So I haven't done this really either yet, but I can go to VoteFlare, and then you can sign up, and if somebody tries to change my registration, I'll be notified. So it's a very practical, it's not going to save democracy by itself, but it's a very practical change that our students were involved with that can help to make sure that use technology as a sort of counter bot technology. Latanya's doing a whole set of things. She is in touch with a well-known whistleblower from Facebook about whether some of the information that was disseminated that way could be used for research. She's bringing some robots to campus. We actually have a robot policy now because she's bringing robots to campus, but she wants students with whom she's working to get a sense for some of the ways in which technology will turn up in their lives. So she's one of our great successes in recruitment. Another one, Sharad Goyal, is also a computer scientist and mathematician. We recruited from Stanford, and he uses technology to help improve public policy. So a particular a tool that he and some colleagues developed in Stanford is being used more in California to try to take racial bias out of prosecutorial decisions. So it's a way essentially of automatically going through arrest records and taking out racial identifiers so the decisions that prosecutors make aren't affected by the race of the victims or the alleged criminals. And this is having a real impact on the ground in California. And now he's connecting with people in this area. So those are two people we're bringing in, and they're research and their outreach and their teaching. I think it's helping to our students to understand ways in which they can use technology for good in public policy and try to reduce some of the harms. We've also had visiting fellows who've done some of the work on regulation, or potential regulation of some of the tech companies, and some faculty members as well. So Jason Furman, who was the chair of President Obama's Council of Economic Advisors, was asked by the British government to lead a big review they did a year or so ago of regulation of tech companies. And Jason led that review, and you can read the report. So we have people who are involved in this, but if you said to me, well, we're building a faculty of 100 faculty members, with roughly what we have at the Kennedy School, how many of them should be tech savvy and tech engaged? You and I would probably both pick a bigger number, the number we actually have. And so we have to get there. And one of the priorities that David Deming, who's the current academic dean, and I have, is trying to build up the school's capacity at the intersection of technology and governance. So some progress, not all we'd like, so you got to come back and ask that question again. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Oh yes, please.
Thank you, Dean Elmendorf, for having us back. My name is Louise Dröker, MPA, mid-career 87.
Welcome.
And one of the first members of the Executive Alumni Council, now the board, 90 to 94, and since ever in touch with the school. I think all of us, under your leadership, we might consider a little activism today on behalf of peace in Ukraine. I belong to the 300 senior UN officials. I worked 30 years in the UN, High Commissioner for Refugees all around the world, and signed a letter to UN Secretary General Guterres, which was delivered on the 15th of April. 1 week later, he was in Moscow and in Kiev talking with both heads of states. And there is a lot of work going on. The pitch I'd like to suggest to all of us here in this wonderful forum is that we might come up with some sort of a verbal or written recommendation out of the Kennedy School of Government, the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, that besides delivering weapons, which are crucially important to have a possibility to negotiate out of strength for peace on behalf of Ukraine and by the Ukrainians, of these incredible, courageous Ukrainian people and president. But we need to also actively continue talking about negotiation. And it will be hard. We will ultimately have to bring Russia back into the family of civilized nations. The regime, I'm not talking about the Russians, I love them. I've studied in Russia, I've worked in Russia. So I wonder whether you and all of you here and online, we could agree that something comes out of the Harvard Kennedy School of Government reunion 2022, that besides delivering a weapon and talking about NATO and of course defending against a possible nuclear war, we have to continue making the effort of building bridges. Would you have some thoughts on that and how we could perhaps work something out, something small but meaningful for the people of Ukraine and the 7 million refugees outside and the almost 10 million internally displaced persons? I can tell you from UNHCR, we have Karen Lindblom, our representative in Kiev, who has already signed agreements for the reconstruction of destroyed houses to reintegrate returning Ukrainian refugees. So there is a lot of humanitarian work done, but the political work, some governments, and I'm not naming any, one belongs to my country also, don't see a role for the UN political mediation. And I think we, as Kennedy School, we can speak up for negotiation.
So thank you for your concern and your good work over many years to help make a more peaceful world. I do have some thoughts on your specific proposal. I think for members of this group who want to sign a letter with you, I think that would be wonderful, and I'm happy to do
The letter
that.
was not signed here. It's
No,
senior UN officials who have signed it to UN
But
Secretary
you want,
General. I
right,
don't
but I'm
want
saying
to have
people
a
here
misunderstanding.
who want to express their support for what you're
Yes.
doing can do so as individuals. The Kennedy School doesn't take positions about specific issues in public policy of the sort that I think you're suggesting.
Okay.
And so President Backhanel and I and other deans at Harvard will offer our views on educational issues, we'll offer views on the values of the university or the Kennedy School, but we don't weigh in with policymakers should do this, they should not do that. And I think the kind of specific way you have in mind, because an awful lot of issues, often not agreement among the members of our community about what the right balance of attention or forces should be. And so we can't do something like you're proposing from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, but people here can band together with you as individuals, and I can see a lot of value in their doing that.
So we just
Thank
need
you.
to figure out how to do it. If people are interested to do something like that, could I have a show of hands who would be interested to, because then I would take action before.
Why don't we suggest that people here want to come find you after we finish this,
Yes.
and then you can exchange information, and then you can follow
Then I
up.
could just report to the group supporting the UN Secretary General.
Yes.
How many? I can take
So I encourage people to talk
quite
with
a
you
size
after
of a
this.
group. Thank you,
event.
Doug Elmendorf.
Thank you very
and
much.
to all your colleagues who put up this reunion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Here, please.
Hi, my name is Aaron Axe. I'm a class of 2012, and I'll admit that I'm one of probably several people in the room or in these combined classes that's a failed political candidate on his first turn at trying to do it.
Good for you for trying.
For state delegate.
Good for you.
The reason I mention that is 2012 had the unique experience of a lot of us were in this room. I'm sorry, not 20. Did I say 2012? 2016. It's been a long flight coming out here. 2016 of being in this room and watching on this screen as our politics changed drastically in November of 2016. And the next morning or next afternoon, you called a convention of the entire school where you gave a speech that I think most of us remember, where you specifically pointed out why you thought that that candidate was wholly unqualified for 3 specific reasons to be the next president of the United States. And then you ordered that the balloons be dropped anyway because they weren't dropped the night before. And this room broke out in a song, in a round of Amazing Grace impromptu, which is a funeral song. And I watched the tears in the room, and I talked to some of my friends, and I tried to reassure them that, of course, Graham Allison's essence of decision-making, second level of bureaucratic control of government, the international norms and institutions would all be a check on what we saw as kind of a radical, assumption of the right in this politics. And in my view, reflecting, because this is what we do when we come back here after 5 years, is reflect on where we were then. I feel like I was wrong when what I said to my friends. I watched congressional subpoenas ignored. I watched international institutions, the power of them crumble. The Ukrainian issue that we're discussing today came about because Russian expansionism was a centerpiece of foreign policy for that administration for reasons that we still don't quite understand, but we can make some assumptions about. My question is you talk about the diversity of our classes now coming into this building. You talk about the diversity ideas that are trying to address some of the most important problems we have. One of the things that I noticed in this building was a lack of diversity of the number of people, and the moderate right especially, in this building in seats here. One of our classmates is in a Republican primary today in Charlottesville, Virginia, where that last candidate said there were good people on both sides of something catastrophic that happened down there. So I would ask you what we're doing about trying to include those ideas here and making them feel welcome, because my discussions with the one who's running today was that he didn't feel welcome, that he had to personally identify himself as a never Trump Republican in this building. He shouldn't have to do that. He should be willing to be able to engage in ideas here. And I think we're missing something here if we're not seeing the other party in this building with more representation. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you for the question, or set of questions. That's a great set of questions. So a few thoughts. The first is I did stand exactly here and say that I thought the person who won the election had not lived up to the values of the Kennedy School in a number of specific ways in the campaign, but that I hoped very much that as leader of the country, that he and the people around him would evolve. And I think I've been mostly disappointed in that, but actually much less disappointed, I think, than you are in the way the system of government has responded. We have, I'm not a scholar of like US constitutional history, but it seems to me that we have developed both in explicit constitutional structures and in the set of implicit ways that we work politically that ensures that no one person actually can just drive the bus off whatever cliff one is concerned about. And there are various ways in which I think our system has been tested over the last 5-6 years. Not always succeeded, but I think on balance actually succeeded. So I'm optimistic about our system of government, not just like in the abstract, but actually in the practicalities. I do think it's very important that the Kennedy School have robust debates about issues of the day from a wide range of perspectives. And I spent a fair amount of time when I came as dean trying to ensure that the speakers we had at the school and the discussions we had generated that kind of robust debate. I've been less successful at that than I had hoped, less successful in part because of the way our politics have evolved in this country. So for example, we often are able to recruit faculty members out of the key figures of a presidential administration who then seem to us appropriate faculty members to teach because not just of the rank that they had in government, but the expertise that they developed, the experiences they had, the ideas they could bring to our students. And that is, in my view, less true of the Trump administration than of a number of administrations, Democratic and Republican, that preceded the Trump administration. So I can't change who presidents appoint, but it's still important for us to ensure a robust set of debates. And so part of that is in visitors. So I've sat here a month or so ago when Chris Christie sat here. I sat here when Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina spoke here. I will say both of them had very enthusiastic receptions, some hard questions, some applause, pictures taken by students with them after their remarks, and they brought a different set of views about tax policy and foreign policy and so on than the sort of modal Kennedy School or median Kennedy School student would have. I think that was all to the good. But visiting speakers are just a piece. And so some question, I've mentioned a bit about the challenges on the faculty side. I think for me, a crucial part of this is, do students feel like they can offer their views? And the answer to that, I think, is not always, and that's a problem for us. Not just a problem at the Kennedy School, it's a problem more generally. I spent a lot of time talking about this actually with John Manning, who's the dean of the law school, Rakesh Khurana, who's the dean of the college. Our schools are the ones at Harvard where this sort of debate is most important, and therefore where we are most worried if it's not happening. We have a number of initiatives underway here at the Kennedy School to try to improve this. For what it's worth, our conservative students meet with me regularly. They know that I am trying to ensure they can offer their views. Much of the challenge, by the way, happens outside of class, not in class. So it's not what happens with a professor there, it's what happens afterward at lunch and at Charlie's and so on. So we're doing a few specific things. So part of this is that last year's orientation had a big chunk dedicated to difficult conversations, or we say sometimes constructive discourse. We had faculty perspectives. We have a faculty member, Julia Minson, a social psychologist, whose study is how people disagree. It is literally, if you and I are arguing, like what's happening in our brains and how can we use that understanding to have a better disagreement. We have another faculty member who spent a lot of his career on the ground in conflict-riven countries. So we had a scholarly perspective and we had a sort of practitioner perspective. And then we made the students go off and had difficult conversations. And they came back and we had a federal mediator come in who worked with groups of students to essentially review what happened in these conversations they had and try to help them to see what went right and wrong and how to do better. And the incoming students loved this. The returning students who were the guides or unhappy they hadn't had this a year before. So we're going to continue this, and we're going to try to build it out over the course of the year, so it's not just a sort of one-off, but has an arc. We're also going to encourage try to support efforts by students to come together across difference. We spent a lot of time thinking through what I might say. I have some great prose on my computer about how I think discussion should happen. To be honest, at the end, my view was that my releasing that was not going to help. This is not something that can just be sort of dictated as a rule. It has to be built into the culture. And we are at a time in this country when people are not good at listening to people with whom they disagree. The gulfs are wider. There are fewer people in an intermediate point, and the arguments tend to consist more of throwing things than exchanging evidence. And so we're working against, I think, a national, in some ways, global tide. But that means we need to push even harder. And so we think between the faculty discussions I launched this past year, between the orientation for students, the ways in which we encourage students to work together, we hope we can have a more robust discussion and a sort of building up of the importance of this in the community over the coming year. And Larry Bacco and John Manning and Rakesh Karan, others and I are in conversation right now about how we can do that in ways that are reinforcing across the university. So we'll keep at it, but thank you for the question. Yes, please.
Yes, thank you, Dean Elmendorf, for your talk today and for your service to the school and to the government before that. My name is Jeff Ashford. I'm a class of 1982 MPP and work for the U.S. Congress in the House Appropriations Committee. I am so I was struck, I wasn't going to start with this, but struck a little bit with your comment about sort of the Kennedy School's adherence to a certain, a high level, if you will, of advocacy for government and governance and all the analysis and everything that goes into all the corpus of work that we do here, but not wanting to adopt a position and take that as an espousal by the school itself. But we're also living in a time of discussions about alternate facts. And I, my office is about 2 steps away from the chamber, and lots of people wandered through there on January 6th. I wasn't there, but that's still is a fundamental thing, so it's driven a lot of our thinking. So without getting to a political discussion about this, what can the school do, and what is the school doing, to deal with sort of fundamental issues of the whole question of what is reality, if you will, fundamental questions about discussions of facts, looking at that sort of holistically, and how you deal with information, disinformation, particularly in institutions that are based upon great traditions of many ways of comedy like ours. How we deal with not just the U.S. Congress, but legislatures everywhere, perhaps. And that's my general question, but perhaps you can amplify on that. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you. It's good to have another fellow I am a former House staff member, so it's wonderful to see you. So you raise a set of interesting and important questions. Let me say a few pieces. So the first one is that I think it is important for the Kennedy School Dean and for the Harvard University President and others here to speak about the values that underlie Harvard Kennedy School and Harvard University. And we tried to do that. And so, for example, I wrote messages to our community following January 6th. Before the election in the fall of 2020, the deans wrote a collective statement that Larry Bacco and Alan Garber joined about the values that we stand for. And the whole point was this came out before the election. It was not a response to particular outcomes. It was, here's what we stand for. And I think it's important for us to do that, but I also think it doesn't have that much effect. I think we overstate, and people tend to overstate, the impact of some statement from Harvard. But I mean, I think about this as an important issue. And so I got to know a Harvard College student from Ukraine. And the event that Ash Carter did here was a discussion about geopolitics and strategy, and it was very, very important. But the forum organizers wanted to bring the human side of this to bear to start with. So they had a Harvard College student, a young woman, speak. When she stood here, her parents and her brother were in the subway tunnel in Kyiv. And she spoke about how hard this was and what she thought US policy should be. And I wrote to her later and I said, thank you so much for coming to do this. It added a lot to our evening. And let me know if I can do anything to help you, whatever that might be. So she wrote back, she said, yes, I want to meet. So we changed my schedule, I met with her right away. And her main question for me was, why can't Harvard do something? Harvard says it's so powerful, its influence is so big, why can't it do something? And I said to her, the extent to which we have power or influence, it doesn't come from like a reaction force of people parachuting in. It doesn't come from the statements. It comes from the strength of the research and the teaching. I said the power of Harvard is in you, this young woman. It's what she's going to be able to do in her life with what she's learning here. So our strength, our influence is mostly over time, and it's in building structures. It's not in sort of hitting back when something bad happens. So that's one point I want to make about what we can do with what we say. I think the second thing is that we need to be teaching the importance of democracy and the skills of democracy and the importance of the rule of law and how that is carried out and so on. And we need to do that for Kennedy School students and also for Harvard College students and law students and business school students and so on. And that doesn't respond to today's events particularly, but it is the most important way to make a better longer-term future. And so in the teaching that we do, and the faculty we hire, and the courses that we try to offer, we are trying to teach people a set of skills and a set body of knowledge that maybe we took for granted that people would know. If you look back at what happened after the Second World War, in the 50s and 60s, there was a lot of conscious discussion at universities and elsewhere about how to build a sort of informed electorate that could lead the world to a better place than the few decades it had just been through. And there were courses for high school students and college students and so on that were about citizenship and democracy and so on. So I think we got a little away from, we collectively in this line of work got a little away from that and need to come back to that. And the third thing to say is that we do a set of projects and research and outreach that do have more immediate effects. And so, for example, this misinformation review that Matt Baum has launched, an online journal in which people are creating a field, which is how do you study misinformation? What is misinformation? How does it spread? Out of that has not yet come the three policy solutions. But it's early days, but this journal is churning up ideas and evidence. And other people here at the Kennedy School are as well. And so I think through the statements we can make, through the teaching and underlying research we do, and through the more immediate sort of policy-facing work, I think we are helping to build a stronger democracy in this country and others. But but we can't do all this overnight. We're certainly not going to do it alone. But I think we are an important part of this effort to renew democracy, and I think we can and will become a more important part to the work that we're doing now. Yes?
Thank you. Kevin Murphy, MPA 2, 1982, concurrent with MBA. I do have 15 people on my payroll at the request of the government of Ukraine working for 3 ministries. And we'll be going over there with a team to figure out how to solve the problems of their businesses and industries and keep people employed and things. So I appreciate the work you've been doing there as well. And just one other observation. It occurs to me that you remember Roger Fisher and his great tools for negotiation. And while it's true that the Kennedy School may not be able to take a position, I think some of the tools that you have in your toolkit and some of the great ability to bring opposing people like we did in Camp David together and talk about their interests. Perhaps Kennedy School does have something to offer in someday bringing parties back to the table with your intellectual capital that you have. So my question is, after a shout out to a great dean's meeting on Monday, that was a great presentation about the school, and to thank the Kennedy School for being able to study under people like both Roger Porter and Dick Darman on one side, the Republican side, and Robert Reich and others on the other. We got it in those days from both barrels, and so that was quite a diversity, and hopefully we can do that. So my question is, climate change is the biggest. We're going to have a session on climate change later. It's a big issue. Policy, of course, is fundamental to climate change, and yet Harvard has so many deep scientific resources. Can the Kennedy School play a kind of a producer-director role at bringing and harnessing all of those to bear in a kind of university-wide approach to that? And the quick yes or no question is there a place we can go online to see some of these great forum events from the past that you mentioned, like the former Secretary of Defense? Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you. So thank you for your work in Ukraine. I'm delighted to hear about that. Such important and hard work for years ahead, and so thank you. I think on the forum, I think maybe my colleagues know better. I think you can go online at the Harvard Kennedy School Forum or Institute of Politics Forum, and I think that the videos sit there on YouTube or something, but I think you can find them there and you can watch. And so please do that. You can watch these live that way, but you also can go back and watch them after they've been, watch them later for some period of time. So please do that. I think you're right about the negotiation point as well. We teach a lot of negotiation at the Kennedy School. It's it's in our required curriculum for MPP students. A lot of students also take negotiation courses as electives. We're trying to arrange right now for a visiting faculty member for the fall with expertise in international negotiations. So I take that point. On climate, the university is now working very hard to pull together the resources of the university. And we are definitely a key part of that here at the Kennedy School. Jim Stock, who's an economics professor, but many of you may know as a Kennedy School faculty member, jointly appointed in the economics department and the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. Jim is the new vice provost for climate and sustainability. There's never been a vice provost for that before. And in fact, the vice provost roles have always been sort of administrative in sounding. So we have vice provost for research, and we have vice provost for international affairs. This is the first vice provost on a specific substantive issue. And Jim's mandate from Larry Bacow and the Harvard Corporation is to make the whole a lot more than the sum of the parts. And the Kennedy School is one of the distinctive advantages of a Harvard University in doing this. We have amazing scientists and technology experts, engineers, but we also have a Kennedy School. And we have a law school and a business school. And we have a terrific arts and humanities set of departments. And so if you view climate change as a threat that we need to address in all of the aspects of our society, as I do, Harvard is well positioned to do that because of the breadth that we can bring to bear. But that also makes it a little more complicated. This is not just one set of people in one department. It's a lot of different perspectives. And so Harvard's working very hard to build that. And I think you will hear some real progress in coming months. At the Kennedy School, we actually persuaded Jim Stock, before he was announced as the vice provost, to chair a search committee for us. We've successfully recruited a junior faculty member working right at the intersection of sort of climate analysis and practical issues. So he works a lot on land use, on water use. He actually helped start a farmers cooperative along the way to a PhD in sustainable development. He's going to join our faculty. And we have offers out to 2 senior faculty members who are and will be leaders in climate and energy for decades to come. And those are 2 very important appointments. Larry Bacow and Alan Garber are helping us with the recruitment effort, and I hope we'll have some good news to report by the fall. But we need to do more of that over time. We have terrific faculty here. I hope you all took courses at various points with John Holdren or Bill Clark or Rob Stavens or Henry Lee, Joe Aldi, and so on. But a number of the people I just mentioned are moving into retirement. And so it's crucial for us to bring to the Kennedy School and create at the Kennedy School the next generation of leaders. And that's in this area, and that's what we're trying to do as part of a coordinated university effort. So we're right at the heart of this. If you want to see some of what's happening at the Kennedy School now, go online to Climate at HKS, and it's a website that gives you a feel for some of the work that our faculty and staff and students, and I think some alumni are doing as well. So thank you. Jen.
Good morning, Dean Elmendorf and everyone. I'm Jen Tutak. I'm a 2012 grad from the 2-year MPA program. And as the chair of the HKS Alumni Board this past year, I have a question about our youngest alumni. So in just a few days, Harvard is going to have its first graduation back in person since the pandemic, and also its first ever and hopefully last ever makeup graduation. So I was just curious, how is the Kennedy School going to celebrate the classes of 2020, 2021, and 2022 next week?
We hope we're rested enough, but it's super exciting. We really missed having this exclamation point on the year for the classes of 2020 and 2021. And Larry Bacow was very clear at the time that we were going to give those classes honest to goodness graduation. And so about half of the members of those classes for the Kennedy School will be back for the extra commencement next Sunday, a week from tomorrow. Actually, in Harvard College, I'm told that more than 80% of the students in those classes will be here. And so the tent will stay up. I've written a different speech for those students. We don't want them to have a kind of the leftovers from the speech I'll give next Thursday. So we're going to do the whole thing up again, and it's just a matter of whether we have the stamina to do this. And not feeling sorry for myself. This is the facilities people. It's the dining services people. It's the media people. It's a huge school-wide effort to pull off one commencement, especially at the end of a long year. And most people turn off their email or phones for a few days afterward. And this year we're saying just hang in there for 3 more days, and we'll do the whole thing. But I'm really eager, I say personally, to see those students, those young alumni, back here again, and to send them off with the pomp and circumstance and the handshakes and the hugs and the tears and the laughter that I think we sent you off with. And so I'm totally psyched, but I think a bunch of people here will indeed be unreachable by email or phone for a few days afterward.
That's awesome. Unprecedented, but I'm sure it's going to be awesome. So thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Sir.
Yeah, thank you, Dean Elmendorf. David Calvert from the class of 97, mid-career MPA. I want to join you first in just thanking all the people that made this reunion possible. And it's so great to come back every 5 years. Yeah. I really appreciate you raising the flag of public policy, and I think that's the Kennedy School's special thing. All the other schools don't really have that, and that's so important, and yet it's not really working right now too well. I mean, it's working in all kinds of ways, but it's not getting to where we want to get to, and some of the issues you raised at the beginning are so really solvable if we do the right thing with our government. So I just wanted to raise one thing that used to happen in the 90s when I was here, is that the Kennedy School did a seminar for every congressman, and maybe senators too, as they arrived into office, their first term. And that January when they were being sworn in, they'd spend a few days or a week or something here at Harvard and get sort of trained in how to do public policy and how to do their job. And I think that got lost along the way. Is that true? And
No. So there have been, I think, ups and downs over time, but that program exists today. We've done this each of the last Decembers of even-numbered years, virtual when we had to, and we draw members of the House, incoming members of the House of Representatives from both parties.
Do the Republicans show up?
Republicans come, and they have a few days together in a less partisan and ideological environment. In fact, a few rounds ago, the members who came issued a joint statement at the end of the meeting that they drafted themselves, issued themselves, about how they were going to try to stick together as a class of incoming members of the House and not just be divided. Now, the challenge is that we do what we can here. They go to Washington and they come to the front door of the Capitol, and there are 2 lines, and some people are sent down this chute and some go down that chute. I think it's very hard for them. And in my own time working for the Congress, working for Republicans and Democrats, they are individually, in many cases, frustrated by that, but also individually unable to change that. And so we will keep doing what we can. These programs are very important. I also want to emphasize here, we do a lot of work with state and local governments. I mean, my own background is with the US government, and we do a lot of work with folks in the US government and other national governments. But we do a tremendous amount of work with people with subnational governments in this country and others. So our program, funded by Bloomberg Philanthropies to train mayors, works with mayors from across the country and around the world. Jeff Liebman's Government Performance Lab has now worked with 75 or so state or local governments in the United States. So we also shouldn't lose sight of just how much crucial public policy is being made at the state and local level, and the Kennedy School's connection to that work, which is growing over time.
Okay, well, thanks. Keep on pushing, please.
Yes, thank you. We will. We will. Yes.
Hi, thank you so much. Ian Palmquist. I'm mid-career from 2012, and I'm also board president of Adaptive Leadership Network, which, as you know, grew out of the Kennedy School here. I think we've seen in the last few years the real challenges of a big man, authoritarian approach to leadership, and the teaching of leadership is needed more than ever. So I'm interested to hear in how the school is committing to the teaching of the practice of leadership and to propagating tools that emerge from here, like adaptive leadership, out to the broader world.
Yeah, so thank you for that. The school, so I am personally very committed, and the school as a whole is very committed to training public leaders. I think Joe Nye may have been the first dean to sort of stress this in his comments, but that spirit continues, and I think in some ways is stronger today than ever. And so we just recently recruited to our faculty Deval Patrick, former governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, who's a professor of the practice of public leadership here now, and is co-director of our Center for Public Leadership. And his co-director is Hannah Riley Bowles, a longtime member of our faculty. And between them, they bring both the scholarship of leadership and the practice of leadership. And they're working with the many faculty members affiliated with our Center for Public Leadership to think about the way in which we teach in curricular and co-curricular ways leadership at the Kennedy School. I don't think we ever will have or should have like the way that we do this. One of the beauties of this place is that a lot of different ideas are contending with each other, and that's true in leadership, and I like that. But I think these faculty members can work together to learn more about each other's approaches, to see where there are gaps in what we do, to see whether there are synergies we can create in what we do. And so Deval and Hannah are very focused on that. But we've been hiring faculty focused on leadership, offering a lot of courses that are very popular with our students, and we continue to keep doing that. I think the other point you mentioned is how do we get these ideas beyond our walls? And that's always important and often a little bit hard. And I think for some things that we do, it's easier to see who the target audience is outside. So if you're teaching geostrategy, geopolitical strategy, well, you want to find the leading foreign ministers and defense ministers of the countries that matter most, and we can kind of make a list of that on a page or two, and then we had made a good start. Public leadership matters so much, in fact, because there's so much of it in so many different ways, in so many different sectors and organizations and so on. So how you connect with the target external audience, I think, is more complicated, and we need to keep working on that.
Thank you so much, and want to invite alumni to check out Adaptive Leadership Network, and we'd love to have you join our online programs or our conference in the fall. Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Yeah, I'm Jim Harlan, MPP 1977. First, a shout out to anybody at any level that actually ran as a candidate, because that was what real political leadership's about. My question relates to the gap in this country between the urban coasts and the rural areas, and what the Kennedy School and your metrics are doing in both activity programs, students, and faculty to address the very real concerns that is causing the great divide that we have in this country that's evidence in the maps that everybody can see.
Yeah, so thank you for that question. I guess I think there are two ways for me to answer that question. One thing is to say that in the work that we do with subnational governments, we are working right across the country. This is not like we spend some of our time on this coast and some of our time on the other coast. If you look at the list of places at the Government Performance Lab, the 75 governments I mentioned, those are across the map. If you look at the mayors who've come to the Bloomberg Mayors Program, that's across the map in this country and others. If you look at the new mayors who come to the Institute of Politics, or the incoming members of Congress who come to the Institute of Politics, or any of these areas where we're working with public leaders, we are deliberately seeking to work with leaders, red states, blue states, urban areas, rural areas, left coast, right coast, you name it. So in that sense, we are reaching out as much as we can across the entire country. A different approach to the answer is to say that there are some fundamental economic and other challenges that are different in different parts of the country. And we need to make sure that when we study economic policy, say, and I'm an economist by training, we're not just studying the economic problems as they appear from Cambridge, also studying the economic problems as they appear from Kansas City. And so we're doing more of that now. Gordon Hansen, an economist we recruited a few years ago, best known for his work on the effects of the China trade shock on the US economy. But from that, he's gotten more and more interested in local areas, and because of course that's how the China trade shock has really hit. And now he's doing a whole set of work about what's happened in and can be done to help parts of the country that have been really so badly hurt, both economically and then through that socially, through economic changes. And so we have he and colleagues here and some colleagues at MIT just received a very large grant from the Hewlett Foundation meant to dig into what an economic policy approach or framework might be that would ensure that economic growth in this country and others is broadly shared. And Gordon's start to that is gathering data. So in fact, there is no systematic data, I'm told, of what sorts of policies are tried at the local or regional levels for economic development and how they work or don't work. And Gordon's starting point is to create that body of evidence. But you can look some of this up online. If you look at Professor Gordon Hansen in Harvard, I think you can find online some of the work he's done about particular places in the country that have suffered from overall economic changes that might have been good on average, but was terrible for people in that area. And you can see the evolution, I think, of some of his work in that area.
Are there any concerns or collaborations with the business school to address these issues?
It's a good question. The business school, as maybe you know why you asked that question, is trying to focus more itself on sort of economic issues of the American heartland. I don't know if we're working with them on this topic. We have a number of joint appointments with the business school, a number of topics where we are collaborating. I'm not sure if this is one of them. That's a good question. I will talk with Gordon and look into it. So thank you. I think we're supposed to be almost done, but I will take, are you waiting, sir? So I also can stick around afterward. So you have the last question.
Okay. My name is Emile De Guzman, and I'm a class of 92 mid-career MPA. Oh, I didn't know I had an audience. So anyway, I am, for many years I was a public dispute mediator, and now I'm a college professor in California. I wanted to talk about something that you said that brought up, which is a specialization in international negotiations, okay? And I would want to make a recommendation for the Kennedy School to really look into post-conflict healing and transformation. We have people in the world who go into countries that have been war-torn, like in Rwanda and in Cambodia, where there were bloodbaths. And there are people who, as mediators, go in to these countries, and their whole thing is to try to bring people together. They will have stories about, this guy killed my son, or this people killed my family, sitting next to each other, trying to somehow rebuild a country. And they have that role. I'm asking the Kennedy School that in a world that we live in today, where there is such incredible conflict, that we find, I mean, maybe you can tell me if you have it already, but I'm not sure whether the school has addressed that. That isn't so much negotiations and in mediation, but specifically around post-conflict healing and transformation. So anyway, that's my point.
Yeah, so thank you for the question and suggestion. I'm not sure what the answer is, to be honest. We have some faculty members who work in post-conflict situations. So Catherine Sickink, a distinguished member of our faculty, a globally known expert on human rights, has worked on issues of truth and reconciliation in countries following conflicts. I'm not sure she's done quite what you're talking about, and I'm not sure if there are other people here who are doing that or not. But I think it is a very important direction, as you say. And so let me think about that and talk with Catherine and see if we're doing all that we can be doing.
Thank you.
So thank you. Thank you all so much. It's been great to talk with all of you. Thank you. I think it's the faculty panel at 10:30, if I have this right. So you have, in a good Kennedy School way, you have 9 minutes off before your next class. Have a really great time here. Thank you, everybody.